And I think sex gets kind of a bad rap because they look at it a lot from, well, that's a man's need.
Yeah.
No, it's not just a man's need. It's a marriage need. Thank you for joining us for the Blended Kingdom Families podcast. This podcast is for blended families, the people who love them, and anyone who just wants to improve their marriage and family relationships.
BKF exists to break the cycle of divorce, equip marriages, and unite blended families with the truth of God's Word. It is our hope that today you will receive biblical guidance and practical resources that will bring unity and peace to create your thriving, healthy home. Let's jump in.
Hey guys, welcome to the BKF podcast. We are so excited you're here with us today. If you haven't already, take an opportunity, like, share, comment. You're going to want to send us your feedback on this episode because it's going to get juicy.
It's going to get juicy.
But we're excited you're here today. This is our series on, we're entering marriage and a season of marriage conferences. So
Yes.
We're excited. So if you haven't already, XO is going to be kicking off their new, their conference season. We have our first conference coming up in Grapevine, Texas. It's sold out right now, but you can go to XO now and stream this.
Yes.
So this is the season. That's
Yes.
the season of love.
Yeah.
I mean, it's February.
Yeah.
It's Valentine's.
Yeah. Well, it's getting close.
It's really getting close.
Yes.
And we're going to be talking, we're going to do a couple of series on intimacy, better known as sex. But there's a lot, there's other things.
There's different
there's
kinds
other
of
stuff.
intimacy. Yes.
But we're going to talk about, we pulled a stat recently that said, just in frequency, the average, couples, how many times they have sex yearly.
Yeah.
Obviously, the younger ones had more.
Yeah.
And then as you're older, I think the 40 to 50 was like 56 times a year. So that's like 1.1 something times a week.
Okay.
Seems low, but, So we're going to talk about how to address frequency today.
Yeah.
So now, Vanessa, we have kids and have very busy lives. So, and I know if you're watching out there, you're like, okay, I get it. Marriage, sex, it's important. But we have kids, we have schedules, we have all these different things. So let's talk about some ways that we can kind of smooth out things and look at ways that we can increase the intimacy in our marriage.
Well, I think first, just to put a disclaimer out there, as we're talking about this, we know that, we have so many couples that come to us, and in blended families, I think it's heightened even more just because schedules are so much busier and, there's a lot more going on, so to speak. But, we understand that anybody who is really struggling in the area with their spouse to have more intimacy or have more sex, there's so many different things that can be happening. There can be physical things going on with our bodies. There can even be maybe some past relationship traumas or sexual trauma that has happened in the past. So we want to be sensitive to that. We know that everyone's situation is different and everyone's sexual situation, so to speak, is different. And so, but, one of the questions that we get a lot is, how can I engage in more intimacy with my spouse? And, one thing that we talked about is that kind of with couples and with spouses, it can be this mood point of talk. Like it can actually be something that's hard to talk about.
Yeah.
And so, how can you first start having that conversation, which then can probably lead to having more sex, more enjoyable sex, and, having it on a regular cadence.
Yeah. And I think in the next episode that we're going to do on intimacy, we're going to talk about, how to have what we consider probably more difficult conversations about sex. Some of them may not be difficult. It may just need to happen.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about communication as it relates to around intimacy and sex. And I want to point out, we're using these two words kind of independently.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that I stress why we're doing that. Because I think they mean different things to different people.
Yeah.
Intimacy is not just sex.
Yeah.
It does include sex.
Sure.
Whereas sex can include intimacy and the physical aspects of sex. So we're going to use these independently and talk about them independently.
Yeah.
But for those couples out there that are struggling in these areas, and again, blended families, we get it. You have lots of kiddos.
Yep.
We have 4 boys.
Yeah.
And I've made it a comment several times to Vanessa. I always feel bad for her because it's very hard to be feminine in our house.
Yes.
And to feel sexy because normally there's like 4 kids running around, 2 of them barely have any clothes on. Somebody's yelling, somebody's screaming.
Yeah.
And I suspect it's probably the same at your house. So the first thing we would say is make sure you have a good lock on your door.
Yes.
A healthy lock on your bedroom door is the first step. I mean, you got to have that.
Yeah, just inserting a little humor there, you guys. But yeah, you know, I would say, you know, one of the first things when it comes to frequency and having sex, you know, a lot of people, you know, try to schedule sex because, again, schedules are so busy. And we've talked about this a little bit before. But you guys, you know, everything pulls for our attention. And especially, you know, I'm going to speak from the mom's point of view, and Scott, you can speak from the husband's. But, you know, as a mom, I've got so many things on my plate, right? I'm juggling the kids. I'm juggling, you know, work at the ministry. I'm also in grad school. So I'm juggling my schoolwork. And I have 10 million plates that are spinning. And so a lot of times at the end of the day, like, you just don't feel like it. Like, let's get real. As moms, we're tired, you know, our energy is spent, and, you know, sometimes the last time, you know, at the end of the day, we just don't feel sexy, and it's just not the first thing on our mind, you know, that we want to do. And so I think one of the things, you know, that we've talked about, that as a mom, you know, how can I still serve my husband, and how can we still make that a priority in our marriage when we have all of these things going on? And so, you know, I think one of the things, you know, that I've thought about, just me personally, it's like, what can I lay down? What can I lay down that'll take some of that stuff off of my plate so that I'm not so tired during the evening? Or, you know, actually putting maybe things on my calendar. And I know people think that's weird that you're going to have sex with your husband or spouse, like, on your calendar.
You can maybe make it a little disguised, you know, come up with a code word or
sexy time.
Yeah.
No, but Sean and Lynette Reed actually talk about this book in Marriage and Transition, and they talk about using technology and devices to schedule time. And if you haven't picked up that book, you guys, it's awesome. You need to. But I agree. I think, you know I'm very busy. We're very, very busy. A lot of people are, but sometimes it's just putting it on your schedule and knowing, hey, like, this set aside time is going to be for me and my spouse. Like, you're thinking about it, you know that it's coming up. Maybe you can be thinking about some things that you want to do, or, you know, what that's going to look like. But again, making sure that that is a priority, and not letting the little things get in the way. You know, we've talked about, like, if you get home and you have nothing left to give to your family or to your spouse, then you've probably given too much in other places. And you guys, our intimacy with our spouse is so important. It's vital to the health of our marriage. And so, you know, making that a priority, it's imperative.
Yeah. Well, and I'd also like to say, you know, for any of the husbands out there listening, and they see their wives going through this, and they see their wives juggling 50 million things, I don't want you to separate that to say that they don't think you're important. They know you're important. They know, but they literally have so many things to complete in a day. And I'm just going to say, our male brain, we don't think like women do. We don't handle the amount of information that our wives do. And so it can be really difficult, but don't replace that with they don't care about you, or they don't care if your needs are met. We have a role to play in this too. So I love what you talked about scheduling. I think you could come up with a better code word to put on your schedule, because certain people see your schedule and they see that, they're like, okay. But maybe you can come up with some little code word. But scheduling is important. The other thing is just kind of doing some check-ins. I mean, you may find that certain seasons are, first of all, you may find yourself in that busy season and go, wait a second. We're not connecting physically, and we're not, you know, maybe we're not doing our date nights. And, you know, there's different things that we talk about in terms of intimacy. Maybe I haven't held my wife's hand very much lately, or I haven't given her enough, you know, maybe hugs, or so you might find yourself in that busy season. And when you find yourself in that busy season, and you find yourself maybe arguing with your spouse more, or arguing, just being generally more irritable, you can go, okay, let's make sure that we go back to the basics here. Let's get back to connecting physically. Let's make sure that we're having sex regularly so that we feel like our needs are being met. The other thing you can do, and I love that I know Vanessa and I, we talk about this a lot as we go into busy seasons. I remember not too long ago, we said, hey, we got a really busy season. And I made the comment, I said, well, let's just make sure that you and I connect. Because I know that that's a glue that will get us through a busy season. If we're making sure that we do that, making sure that, you know, we're having our date nights, making sure that intimacy is regular, we can find ourselves in those busy seasons and go, okay, we've got enough in the tank to make it through this.
Well, and, you know, when we're on a regular, like, cadence with our intimacy and we're having sex regularly, it's like going to the gym, right? So, like, a lot of times you don't want to do it, but once you go, you feel
better.
amazing after, right? So I think, and you set that schedule. So then it's like, okay, I'm going to start working out. So you get up at 5 a.m. And at first it can be a little hard. It can be a little tough. You may be tired in the mornings, but once you start doing it, your body, it's like your body's waking up by itself on time, and like you're going, and it becomes this a part of your routine, and it's like your body needs it, And so I think that the same thing goes for when you're sexually intimate as well, is that once it becomes a regular cadence, you want to do it. It makes you feel better. It makes you feel closer to your spouse. It's again a part of that glue that keeps you guys together. And because there is so much emotional intimacy tied to sexual intimacy, it's going to make your marriage stronger. It's going to make you guys feel better about one another and feel better about your marriage. And I know we were talking about this before about how women really need that emotional aspect to get to sex, but men, it's almost the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say 100%, the intimacy in the bedroom starts way before the bedroom for women. And guys, we need to realize this. And I would hope, and I know that women give us a lot of grace on this too, because sometimes we're like, okay, sex times. They're like, well, you haven't done anything. And there's some grace there. But in the same breath, and just speaking from a man's perspective, the physical side brings out the emotional side for men. So the more intimacy we're having, the more emotionally connected we are to our wives, the more able we are to fulfill their needs emotionally. Yeah. And it just kind of puts the puzzle together for both couples, but men specifically.
Yeah, I think it's a healthy balance. It's like the women need the emotional, and for men it's like the vice versa. So it's like, how can we meet in the middle together? To make sure that that's happening on a regular basis and we're having that frequent intimacy. And so, you guys, we love the sex chapter of the Bible. Or I'm sorry, the sex book of the Bible.
The Song of Solomon.
The Song of Solomon.
Yeah, just in case, if you've never read this, they talk about sex in the Bible.
They do.
Because God created it, and he created it for married couples, and it's good.
It's good. Well, it was funny because I was reading through scripture, and I'm in the Song of Solomon, and it's 2:6, and it says, "His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me." And so here, you guys, so when I was reading in the study notes, it says sometimes the word embraces refers to sexual activity, such as in Proverbs, but it can also describe the embrace of affection. And it's not necessarily sexual, although the context indicates that it's great intimacy. And so again, I think that goes back where like women, they want to be embraced, they want to be touched, they want to be reassured, they words, like what I'm trying to think of the language. What is it? Words of
affirmation.
Words of affirmation. And so
love affirmation.
Love affirmation. So women need that. But then also, as you were speaking from, a guy's perspective, Scott, it can be the opposite. But I love how when both come together, we can, fulfill our marriage, and it can be beautiful, and you're having great sex, and it's amazing.
Well, and it all comes down, and we talked about this before, and you made the comment, if you want to have more sex in your marriage, have more sex.
Yeah.
And again, we know that there are seasons where people get out of rhythm.
Yeah.
And they become kind of like roommates. They're just kind of business partners that kind of go through the motion. And that's not the way God created marriage to be. And I think sex gets kind of a bad rap because they look at it a lot from, well, that's a man's need.
Yeah.
No, it's not just a man's need. It's a marriage need.
Yeah.
And we need to address it from all sides because men think of it differently sometimes,
Sure.
And women think of it differently sometimes. But if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, intimacy has just been an issue for us. So first of all, if none of these things are kind of going, okay, let's just check the box here and move on, we always suggest, strong biblical counselors are great for helping you in this area. And specifically, even biblical counselors who specialize in sex therapy.
Yeah.
There are those out there.
They are.
They're like, hey, we want to have better sex. We got married so that we can enjoy this.
Yeah.
So let's find people that can help us put that together.
Yeah. And, like we said earlier to guys, when we first started, we know that some people come from sexual trauma and that there can be some really difficult things in your marriage that maybe are hindering that. And so at the end of the day, God created marriage and he created sex and he created pleasure. Like he created us to have pleasure with one another and within marriage. And so, and the enemy is really good about attacking that. And so, if you're just in that season again, where you're struggling to just get on a regular cadence or, you're not having it, frequently and you're feeling that tension. I love that you said, just go back to the basics and okay, are we putting God first? What does our intimacy look like? What does our communication look like? And we're going to talk about that in the next episode. But these are, great things that we can just do to get back just on a regular, cadence. So, make it a priority, make it a date, put it on the calendar. Don't put sexy time.
What is another better word you can put? Like, gotta check the oil?
Snuggle time.
Somebody sees that, they're going to know.
Snuggle time.
They're a great thing. So if you're listening to this and you haven't done that already, you can get on your phone, send your husband, send your wife a calendar invite.
Yeah.
And they're like, what is this? And like, I'll show you later. And then also we would like to suggest Saturdays and Sunday mornings are always good.
Saturdays and Sunday mornings.
Saturdays and Sunday mornings.
Yeah. Find a time or, that works for you. And so we were talking to a couple one time and they were struggling with infertility and they were trying to get pregnant and they were like, we could never do it in the evenings when our kids were home because it always would get interrupted and it didn't make it enjoyable. So it was lunchtime. So they would, the husband would come home on his lunch break and they did a lot of quickies and they loved it. And it was awesome because children weren't there. They could enjoy it and they made it a regular thing. And then they ended up getting pregnant and they now have 3 kiddos. So I love that story. But yeah, you guys, it's also about just finding a time that works for you. Maybe it's in the mornings, maybe it's in the evenings, maybe it's lunchtime, finding what works for you guys.
Yeah. And this episode was really to address like the frequency of sex and intimacy.
Yeah.
We know that there are deeper issues here.
Absolutely.
And as we look at, and as you explore your marriage and maybe this is, your new marriage in a blended family, we know that there are things that maybe are behind the scenes that are affecting this.
Yeah.
So next week, we're going to talk all about how to have communication. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say the different way. How to talk about sex.
There you go.
How do we talk about this? How do we bring it up without starting an argument? How do we bring it up where you're not going to feel embarrassed?
Yeah.
Because again, people have different sexual histories.
Yep.
And so they have different needs, different wants, different desires. So we're going to talk about how to navigate all of those things next week.
Sure.
So guys, thanks all for joining in today. Again, if you haven't already, EXO is doing a tremendous amount of work for marriages.
EXO Marriage Ministry.
Yeah, EXO Marriage Ministry. But you can go to EXO now if you want to watch the Grapevine Conference. It's coming up. It's absolutely amazing. You can subscribe and you can live stream that. And thank you so much for joining us today and have a wonderful day.
Be blessed in all that you do.
Hey guys, so glad you were here with us today, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
And you can find more resources from Blended Kingdom Families at blendedkingdomfamilies.com. Join us again next time as we hang out with more amazing podcast guests. And remember, nothing will be impossible with God.